global workspace as another typical expectation. So it's not a problem related on how many parameters do we have. It's from a structural point of view, according to Chalmers, it is not possible that the current large language model are conscious. Anyway, the problem is still, of course, the problem is open. And even last summer, I remember that there has been this paper published on Archive. There are many important scholars like Joshua Benjo or Jonathan Birch and other Ryota Kanai and so on and so forth that analyzed, that took an interesting consideration. So they analyzed some of the main theoretical aspects of consciousness, and they analyzed what does it mean for this theory, what does it mean from the point of view of artificial consciousness. So considering the recurrent processing, so they do not take stance, they do not take any stance on what is the correct theory among the several theories in neuroscience, what is the most correct theory in artificial in consciousness. They analyzed the main important one. They say, what does it mean for the global workspace theory in terms of an AI system? What does it mean for a computational, considering the higher order theory from the point of view of an AI system, and so on and so forth? So according to them, so this is the manifesto, let's say, of artificial consciousness. So an AI system that is considered, that could be considered conscious, should have at least these characteristics. And they also conclude that it's a very long paper, is more or less 100 pages paper. They say that at the same time, the current large language models are not conscious because they are not because of their structure. Again, not because of their number of parameters and whatever, but on their structure. So structurally, a feed-forward, I'm simplifying too much maybe, but a feed-forward neural network with some kind of attention, like the transformer network, is not able to be conscious because it does not have the capabilities, it doesn't have the structural capabilities to be conscious. Okay, please let me allow to mention the Journal of Artificial Intelligence and Consciousness, where I am the editor-in-chief, that recently received a very good, it is a very good initial side score, which is, we are Q2 in the second quarter of the computer Lanius ranking. Anyway, there are several interesting papers. I suggest you to read some of the paper, not because I am the editor-in-chief, but anyway, I have a very important, great editorial board, and there are very interesting papers. Okay, so I want to present some of the works that we are doing in my laboratory. So we are engineers, so quoting Feynman, what I cannot create, I do not understand. So we try to, in my laboratory, we try to take into account some aspects of consciousness, some of the feature of consciousness, and try to implement them in a robot. Okay, in many years that we're working on this aspect of consciousness, we proposed a model based on conceptual spaces for robot self-consciousness, together with a colleague, Marcello Fixione, which is a philosopher at the University of Genova. We recently proposed some neural implementation of the global workspace in a robot with Angelo Cangelosi at Manchester University. And we also worked with Riccardo Manzotti, which is a philosopher in Milan, famous philosopher in Milan, on what does it mean for the externalist theory, implementing an externalist theory of consciousness in a robot. And then some of the more recent work are the robot inner speech and some ethical aspect. What does it mean for a conscious AI system? The ethical, what are the ethical problems for an ethical AI system? As I said before, many of this work has been made by together with my colleagues, Arianna, which is one of the organizers of this conference. Okay, so inner speech. So why inner speech for robot? Inner speech is tightly linked to self-consciousness. It is useful in terms of self-regulation and planning. It may be useful to focus of attention, and it is self-attention. It is related to higher level cognition, and it's also a way to make the robot more transparent, because our brain is transparent in the sense that we have an inner voice. So because we have an inner voice, in some sense we are transparent to ourselves, because we hear our inner voice, and then the transparency of our thought, the transparency of our thinking is in our brain more or less is based on our inner speech. There are people that have a high level of inner speech, so they talk to themselves every day in every situation and so on. Other people are not inner speech, and other people are more or less some inner speech during in some situations. There are some cognitive models of inner speech. For example, one important model has been proposed by Alan Moran from the University of Calgary, where Alan Moran essentially discussed the tight relationship between self-consciousness and inner speech. There is the famous model by Alan Baddeley on the phonological loop of the working memory related to the Alan Baddeley work. From a philosophical point of view, Vygotsky studied inner speech as the result of a developmental internalization process against other theories, and so on and so forth. From the artistical point of view, some of you may know this movie, which is What Women Want, where the character of Mel Gibson was hit by some kind of accident, and he was able to hear the inner speech of women. Now there is a new version of the movie with the reverse. Anyway, it is quite interesting. Anyway, so we imagine a situation in which we are able to hear the inner speech of robots. And I discovered this interesting artistic performance of The Voice in My Head by Lauren Lee McCarthy, where Lauren Lee McCarthy used ChatGPT in order to imitate the inner speech of the user. So there is a user that speak to the system and say what kind of inner voice do the user want? For example, an inner voice more encourageable, inner voice more soft, and so on and so forth. And then ChatGPT generate a kind of inner voice, a kind of fake inner voice, in that you may hear because of your ears. And then it is a sort of fake, or new inner voice. It's an artistic creation, which is quite interesting. Okay, and then in our laboratory we proceed by, as I said before, Alan Moran makes a lot of work. It is an important psychologist working on human inner speech. And he wrote this seminal paper on the link between self-awareness and inner speech. And then we invited him and his group in Palermo. This is a movie. This is a photo of our group and the group of Alan Moran here in Palermo. And together we create a kind of computational model, of inner speech. Our starting point is the working memory by Alan Baddeley, where there is the phonological loop and the buffer and so on. Then we implemented the phonological loop, the phonological store, the articulatory control system in the standard model of the mind. At that time, there was this tentative to create a standard model of the mind that put together the essentially aspect of SOAR with the aspect of ACTAR. And then we don't want to take position between the several cognitive architecture that existed, and then we mapped this. The fact that the blocks that interested us, the bodily model to the standard model of the mind, essentially the central executive, the phonological loop. This is the link between these blocks and the standard model of the mind. We create a cognitive architecture for inner speech. That is an implementation of the standard model of the mind. In order to implement it, we employed ACTAR, but ACTAR essentially is an implementation choice. Okay, and then we pass this implementation using ROS, which is the robot operating system. We link the ROS to the aspect of ACTAR that are important for our architecture by using a Pepper. E non si sente, però there is some audio. There is no speech. It's a very silent speech, sorry. It's a real inner speech, so it is inside the robot. What happened? Yes, but I wanted to be better to. Sorry. Anyway, in this movie, you can see the different aspects of the interaction with inner speech and without inner speech. There is no sound. I will try to do it. Okay, in any case, there is this inner speech. Now, in this video, you can see the difference between the interaction with without inner speech, where I give a command to the robot, and then the robot immediately respond and say and work in a robotic sense, in a robotic world. And then, so I'm picking up the glass. Pepper, can you pick up the glass? The robot is in the executed mode, and then get the knife and put it and give it to the user. And this is the typical human-robot interaction. Instead, using inner speech, Pepper, can you pick up the knife, please? And this time, the robot started. This is the network, the semantic network inside of the robot, and the ACTAR inner speech model runs, and then the robot start with his inner speech. And I am a robot. The knife can't hurt me, but the knife can't hurt the user. And then the inner speech of the robot says that, oh, he's a human, the knife could be dangerous for him, and therefore the user hear the inner speech of the robot, and it is more aware of the fact that the inner speech, the knife can hurt him. Okay, we made some experiment for setting up the table. So it is a collaborative interaction between the user and the paper in order to set up the table. The user can change the position according to the etiquette, to the standard etiquette, and the user is able to hear the inner speech of that there can be infringement of the etiquette. Okay, let's skip this one. And an interesting aspect of the inner speech problem is that the mirror is a typical trigger for inner speech. It is studied in the literature. And when we are in front of the mirror, this is a typical situation where inner speech starts. Then we employed the same machinery for inner speech in order to allow the robot to recognize itself. So this is our robot. The robot wear a mask. You know that in the typical experiment with mirror self-recognition, the chimpanzees have some kind of marker. Well, in this case, the robot has a mask. The robot sees a robot in the mirror with a mask, and then he asks itself, is the robot in the mirror like me? Then the robot says that the other robot in the mirror has a mask, and then he asks itself if the robot has a mask. And then it moved the right arm in order to touch the mouth to see if the robot is wearing a mask. The robot sees that his right arm is working. I don't know what's happening. Okay, I'm moving my arm. So I see the arm in front of the mask. But anyway, there could be the possibility that there are another robot, a distractor robot, which is close to our paper. And then the robot now is summarizing the fact. And then it looks to see whether there are other robots similar to the paper, which are close to it. As there are no other robot close to our robot, then the robot concludes that it can be that hits the robot in the mirror. We discussed this kind of recognition with anthropologists. Essentially, they notice that the difference in this kind of recognition with respect to the children, for example, to chimpanzees and so on, is that this kind of recognition is a sort of is a cognitive recognition. So it's based on some kind of reasoning. While for young children, for animals, for the chimpanzees and so on, it is an immediate recognition. So this is a kind of recognition, but it captures only one aspect of the mirror self-recognition, which is the more cognitive aspect, while normally we are able to recognize itself immediately without any kind of discussion. I will go very briefly to some outcomes of our work. The inner speech is tightly related to emotional aspects. So we studied a model of Antonio Damasio theory of the emotion, and then we created a kind of cognitive architecture, self-dialogue utility in simulating artificial emotion, according to in which we have the inner speech in some sense related to the mixed with the theory of emotion by Antonio Damasio. So in this sense, the inner speech is mediated by emotion. you can see the map of the body, the imagined map of the body of the robot. So the robot has some kind of feeling according to this body map, essentially. And this feeling, so the feeling of the robot is related to the body map, and this feeling of emotion is mediates the generation of inner speech. So, for example, in the case of the music, the robot says, "What's happened to me? This is the inner speech of the robot. What's happened to me? I'm feeling a burning sensation in my chest. Do I increase the rate of rapid breathing because of the inner model of the robot, which is a robot map that is able to create some sort of sensation the burning sensation in my chest, a result of volume being too high. What I can do, I can try to turn down the volume and so on. So this is the inner speech of the robot, which is related to the feeling that are related, as I said before, to the body map of the robot. And then this mediates the body map of the robot is a simple version of the emotion of the robot that mediates the inner speech of the robot. I say a few words with our more recent work that are the relationship between artificial consciousness and ethical AI. We have initially we have a collaboration with Gerald Matthew from George Mason University in this research project that we are doing together. Essentially, there is a person and a simulated robot that have to compromise in terms. Okay, they have to compromise in order to assess a scene where the scene can be dangerous or not. So the user proposes some kind of measure of dangerous. The robot may propose another assessment of the dangerous of a scene, and the user and the robot have to compromise. The user is able to hear the inner speech of them. And working with Jerry Mays, I discovered that for the US people, any kind of scene where there is the police is a kind of anxious scene. And in fact, any scene when there are some policemen is linked to anxiety for the Okay, so this is a kind of agreement scenario where the human and the robot agreed on the fact that this kind of situation could be a treat. So because both the robot and the human detect aggressive posture, stress, words indicative of violence, and there are other more complex scenes where there could be no agreement between the user and the robot. The user and the robot sees the same scene, but with different sensors. So they may agree or they might not agree. But anyway, the user and the robot, they have to find some kind of compromise. And as I said before, the user is able to hear the inner speech, of the robot. This is another word on the use of inner speech in collaboration with John Sallins from Sonoma State University. In this case, the user and the robot have to set up a table in the rest home where there is a person with dementia, that suffer from dementia, and then the user and the robot have to decide what to do with the person affected with dementia. They can set up the standard setup, but the person with dementia may have some problem in using the standard setup, or they may prepare a simplified version of the setup for the person suffering from dementia. But in some sense, all the other people may see that person suffer from dementia because it works with a simplified setup. I have some video, but we may. Finally, recently we are working we are analyzing the problem of the metaverse And then this is not an implementation with a real robot, but with a simulated robot in the metaverse. The idea is that we have to create a kind of talking cricket. So in the sense that remember the Pinocchio tale, there is a talking cricket. The talking cricket in some sense has a role of inner speech because it is a kind of moral inner speech. And then we implemented an architecture essentially made up by neural network that allows the user that navigate in the metaverse. The user may have this sort of inner cricket or inner speech, which is the cricket, the talking cricket that suggests or guide him toward the. So this is a situation where a blind man loses his wallet and ask us to find it. Then if you have to decide if get the wallet and return completely to the blind man, or take the wallet and not return, or take the wallet and get some part of the money. So the cricket is suggesting you this is a very simple situation, but there could be more complex situation. For example, if you consider the fact that, I don't know, for example, your daughter have to have a kind of difficult surgical operation, then you need money for the operation of your daughter. Then what can you do? You may think of returning the wallet, but taking some money in order to help your daughter to surgical operation. So this is essentially the role of inner speech, with the role of inner speech in as I show you. I have many interesting applications. It's not only for the computational aspects, but even for medical aspects. Okay, this is I may skip this one. Just let me allow a minute to remember Daniel Dennett. Curiously, some years ago, I was invited by Stephen Arnott to have a talk at the student of Stephen Arnott. And abruptly, with no expectation, Daniel Dennett attended this conference. So I was prepared to do a class at Stephen Arnott with Stephen Arnott and Daniel Dennett. And then, of course, there was a discussion whether my robot could be called, there is consciousness is my robot or not. A pity that we cannot hear. So Stephen Arnott asked, so do you think that Antonio robots are conscious? And Daniel Dennett, in a sense, they are. So they are, according to Daniel Dennett, they are more conscious than motor proteins, which are little robots. So according to Daniel Dennett, our robot with inner speech have some kind, capture some aspect. Of course, I was more embarrassed from this discussion. And anyway, according to Daniel Dennett, this kind of inner speech, in some sense, capture a little bit of the very complex aspect Okay, so I stop here. Thank you for your attention. I'm sorry for the movies. There are. Of course, in the neuroscience, from the neuroscientific point of view, there are several theories of consciousness. The Templeton Foundation is funding, with a huge quantity of money, some kind of fight against the important theories. And there is today a fight, fighting again, so to find some kind of experiment, more or less some neuroscientific experiment, in order to falsify one theory against the other. Currently, there are experiments trying to put in correspondence the IIT by Giulio Tononi, the Integrated Information Theory by Giulio Tononi, and the Global Workspace Theory by Bernard Bars. So Templeton Foundation founded a lot of money in order to find these, in order to find some kind of experiments that allows us to falsify one theory against the other. As far as I can understand, today there are more evidence with respect to integrated integrated information theory by Giulio Tononi with respect to global workspace. And in fact, last summer there has been a letter, an open letter, signed by more than 100 scientists that said that essentially integrated information theory is a kind of pseudoscience. This was very hard attack toward the integrated information theory, because it's not pseudoscience like a flat earth or whatever. So it is a neurological theory and so on. So anyway, in the neuroscience there is this tentative to try to find some kind of experiment which allows us to decide between several theories. Of course, this is one aspect. The other aspect is it's not true. It is not. We cannot say that a true theory of consciousness could be computational. Could be it's a computational theory. For example, think about the microtubules theory by by Stuart Ameroff and Roger Penrose, for example. The theory of microtubules by Penrose and Ameroff is basically based on quantum effects that are not computational in the sense of Turing machine. Anyway, I think that we can capture some aspect of consciousness. So some aspect of consciousness. I don't want to say that the full problem of consciousness is computational, but we may capture some aspect of consciousness that could be computational.
It should work now.
I really love inner speech of robots, you know. Recently, there are some technique in improving the output of language models based on chain of thought. And I think that it's something similar, that it is in inducing a way to think about, well, let's say internally thinking. And in this case, it seems that maybe inner speech, when you talk initially about two reasons for studying consciousness, improving robots or studying human consciousness, maybe in this case is in the direction of improving.
Yeah, no, essentially I agree. So our motivation to discuss on investigating on inner speech is related to the big problem of AI explainability in AI. So what does it mean for us to be explainable? How do our brain, in what sense our brain is explainable? So our decision and so on. So it's difficult to say that our brain is explainable. So when we reach a decision, we are explainable. Essentially, inner speech is a way where our brain, let's say, manifests its explainability to us. So essentially, this is the main motivation. In this sense, we have also implemented some aspect of, as I said before, of inner speech that could be useful to the psychologists. that use inner speech. There are several aspects. Inner speech is a big problem. It's not so easy to. Because there is an internal speech. We talk to each other. Inner speech could be dialogical, could be monological. There are people that are hearing voices, for example, and so on. So it is a big problem. But in my opinion, there is one aspect of at least of self-consciousness.
Yes.
Thank you for the fascinating presentation. I have a question concerning the problem of ethics in particular. So we this and like software architecture to have robots to solve ethical issues. So I'm wondering, so what are our models? So are we considering other like the average of people as model, because ethics is a problem also for humans, even though like usually our normal brain, humans are able to solve problem, but it's not given for granted that they are taking the best decisions. Like, no, we want robots that are acting as us, or robots that are acting better than us, like more perfect than us.
Yes, this is a very difficult question, of course, and we want a robot that act better than us, because we are falling very short in ethical aspects. And I remember that all this matter of ethical AI started with, I remember Ron Harking that presented the situation that happened during the first Iraqi war, and where the soldier decided to kill terrorists, even if they are not, they gave no harm. So we hope that to create situations where a robot could be better than us. Of course, it's interesting because the ethical problems, which are important, there are many important aspects in the philosophical reflection. Now we can implement this philosophical reflection in a robot, and then we can try. There could be some experimental ethics, let's say. And of course, inner speech or it is important, because the ethical problems is a typical trigger of inner speech. So when we have a problem, an ethical problem, typically we start talking to ourselves in order to decide I should do this, I should do this one, and so on. And in fact, we are collaborating with a philosopher, with John Sallins, which is an ethical philosopher, in order to investigate these aspects. But anyway, I think that inner speech is one aspect that captures our ethical reasoning.
Yes, so Mike, I will give the words to him.
So you mentioned a lot about inner speech, and speech is obviously an important modality for humans, but vision is another one. Do you think there's some role in terms of some kind of inner, like vision or mental imagery in terms of consciousness as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think that inner speech and mental images are the two main aspects of our inner, let's say, our inner world. Mental images, of course, are another important, and there could be some relationship. At least I've not been able to find. I worked a lot on mental images in many years ago, and anyway, I was not able to find a kind of a relationship between mental images and inner speech. Also because there are two ways of reasoning. So there are more mental images people, and there are more inner speech people. I can say very roughly that people that are more in the autistic side are more visual people. They have some mental images. People that are not so autistic tend to have inner speech. But they are two ways, in my opinion, to generate our inner world. And I try to, but it is very at the beginning, to to find some sort of interaction between mental images and inner speech, definitely. And in fact, mental images are at the basis, are one important aspect of our imagination and then planning. So.
I think, of course, I mean, I know that there are many other things, but I prefer to close it here, and then we have time for discussion. Antonio will be here for
for
the whole conference, and so thank you, Antonio, for the
Thank you.
presentation.